On today's Hot Zone, we're going to talk to a former gang member out of Chicago and find out what he thinks about the Black Lives Matter movement and all this violence that's going on around the country. It's coming up right now.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. Kash Lee Kelly is a former gangbanger out of Chicago. This guy has led a difficult life, to say the least, growing up in the worst parts of poor neighborhoods outside Chicago. And he's got an amazing story. But we had an incredible conversation, and I want you to hear the whole thing. So this is part two. If you have not heard part one, you need to go back and listen to that first. But I guarantee you, it's worth every minute. Check it out. Did you come to a point where you felt like you were being used by politicians because of your race?
Politicians.
What?
No, I wouldn't say politicians. I would say all of us being used by media, by the people that are, whoever's in control of media, whoever's in control of what gets shown on the television, that's who's in control. That's who's trying to play people. I don't think it's any one politician. I don't think that at all. Politicians are people like you and I, and they have a job to do. Some of them suck at their job, and some of them shouldn't be in the position that they're in. And like, for instance, the people that promoted Black Lives Matter coming out to their cities and burning and looting and doing all them things that they did and throwing stuff at the police, like Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago, she should lose her job. She did not stand up for the people or for the police. She didn't do her job.
So tell me about the Streetlights initiative that you started and kind of how you are trying to address this, because you're not, Attila the Hun on the right. I mean, you're really doing a great job of bringing together people who really have very, very different worldviews.
Yes. Well, that's the whole goal, is to bring it back to being an American, bring it back to being a human, because it's even bigger than just an American thing now. It's just like a human thing, treating each other as humans. And it's not that hard to do. When you take out the narratives that they try to put in your head and look at the person next to you and understand that they're just like you. We all feel the same pain. We just have a different struggle that makes us feel that pain. But it's the same pain. And if we can shed everything that they use to divide us, like race, religion, creed, politics, economic status, those are the things that they use to divide us. So what I'm trying to do is say, regardless if you're a Democrat, regardless if you're a Republican, we got to come together as Americans and do what's best for America. Well, what's best for America? We stand up against all corruption. We don't just say, oh, we got to stand against the police no, you stand against crooked police, because there's more good police than there is bad police. You stand against crooked politicians, because there's more good politicians than there is bad politicians. And I know that's kind of iffy to say, but
yeah, we used to say that politics comes from two words, poly meaning many, and ticks meaning blood-sucking insects.
I like that. Yeah, but no, man, the whole goal is just to unite people under a banner of understanding, creating healthy dialogue to understand if you feel this way and I feel this way, well, what makes you feel this way? This is what makes me feel this way. How do you feel about what I feel? And is it offensive to you? Did I hurt you? If I did, I'm sorry. And that's the thing. We got to own up. When we do something wrong, apologize for it. Admit you're wrong. That's a part of being a man, is understanding that you're not perfect. You're going to make mistakes. We're not ever going to be perfect until we meet the Lord. But until that time, we have to look at each other as humans, as brother and sister, sister and sister, and say, yo, we cannot allow these people to divide us and create a chaos. And that's what they do, create the chaos to control the situation. So we got to eliminate that and look at each other for what it is. And when it goes into politics, you look at the best person for the job. Stop letting it be, well, you were raised a Democrat, so you got to vote Democrat, or you were raised a Republican, so you got to vote Republican. No, you look at both of these people and you see who is the best fit for the job. Look at what they've done. Look at their track record. Look at all the policies. We got to stop being blindly led. Yeah. And that's the problem that we're facing in America with everything, not just politics, right, but in the streets.
I think we're
You know what I'm saying?
allowing the politicians and the media to paint caricatures of the other side. So, when you
Yes.
go to the beach and there's a guy there with an easel and he's painting caricatures, and you pay him some money, and he looks at you and he kind of takes the features that make you who you are and
Hmm.
exaggerates them to a crazy, funny, kind of silly extent. And your
Yes.
ears are too big, and your nose is real big, and all this kind of thing.
Hmm.
And then he shows it to you, and you recognize yourself in that, but you also realize that doesn't look anything like me. That's not who I
Exactly.
am, right?
Yes, that
And
is a perfect
I
analogy.
think that's what the politicians and the media are doing, is that they're painting a caricature of the people on the other side. And
Yes.
look, we can disagree on the nature of reality all we want. We can disagree on the when does life begin, at conception or at birth, and whatever. But what we have to understand is that the person that I'm arguing with, or many times just arguing at, is a human being with a mind, will, and emotions.
Hmm.
And if we can find something so that we can get to know each other, then we can bridge that gap. And the only way that I have found, look, I was in Syria last year, and was literally serving water to ISIS fighters who had given themselves up. Now, these are
Wow.
guys who have been murdering people, raping women, and cutting people's heads off, and would have gladly, only moments before, would have gladly beheaded me with a knife. But they had surrendered because it was either that or they were going to get killed. And so they were lined up, and they're sitting there out there in the desert in the hot sun, and they're exhausted and dehydrated. And I looked at those people and I thought, those people are my enemy. And I would like nothing more than to put a bullet in their brains. That would be justice. But you know what? Justice is not up to me.
That's
It's
right.
not my job to administer justice right
That's
now.
right.
It's my job to administer love.
Mercy.
And when I swallowed my pride and picked up some bottles of water and carried them over there and handed them to those ISIS fighters, something changed about their countenance. That hatred that they had, that was just tangible, just look in their eyes, you could see the hatred. You just hand them the water, and all of a sudden it just kind of softened a little bit. It didn't go away, but it softened a little bit. And so I think love is the answer to bridging that gap. And we
I
can't love
agree.
each other if we don't spend time getting to know each other. I mean, I can say
I
I
agree.
love that person across the street, but if I don't know him, what do I love about that person? I don't, there's, right?
I
I
totally
mean,
agree.
very often I have to choose to love somebody that I don't want to love or don't know enough to love, but I'm doing that simply because I have been loved and I want to pass that on. And that's where my faith comes in that whole process, is that because I've been loved, out of the overflow of my gratitude for that love, I want to pass that love along to somebody else. And very
Yes,
often that changes people's hearts.
I
So
agree.
I just one more question. Just tell me uh, what what's your opinion when you see a bunch of entitled, pasty white kids lighting things on fire in Portland and breaking down, attacking police and assaulting random passersby, all in the name of Black Lives Matter?
I think it's disgraceful. It's shameful. And what's even more shameful is that the people that started Black Lives Matter won't come out and dispel it and say, hey, that's not what we're about. That's not what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Please stop. But the
I,
reason
I
that they
have to
don't,
I have to point out though that in the week that I was there covering those protests and riots, the only people I saw stand up to the rioters were Black people who were out there saying, guys, this is not helpful. This is not furthering the cause of Black lives in any way, shape, or form. And of course, they were shouted down, they were spit at, they had things thrown at them, and one guy was actually stabbed
yeah.
not long after I talked to him. But I had to respect them for having the courage to stand up to the mob.
Well, it's where you get that whole Antifa thing from, you know? Um, it's got to be people have to disassociate at that point. When you're black and you're standing out there with a bunch of white people that are doing these things, and then you try to tell them not to do it in the name of Black Lives Matter, and then they in turn spit at you and try to stab you, that needs to be a disassociation. Okay, we're no longer going to stay here because this has turned into something else. But because it wasn't all black people that stood against them, because some black people were there with the mob.
Yeah. No, it was actually only 3 people out of 5,000 that I saw over that week.
I hear you. I understand. But just there being one will encourage them to keep doing what they're doing, because it's in the name of that one's life. Because even one life, that's what they'll use. I've heard them say it, you know, or to talk about their friends that got killed. That's why they're out there causing chaos. What it makes me feel is anger. I feel angry at the fact that they're out there doing those things.
Well, I want to encourage you and commend you for being one of those who stands up and says this is wrong and it needs to stop, even if it's done in the name of furthering, racial relations or justice in America. Doing it that way is wrong and it needs to stop. And I commend you for having the courage to stand up and say something about it.
Thank you.
There are probably a lot of people that live around me here. I'm at my home in West Virginia right now.
I love West Virginia.
And there are probably people who live down this street who don't know any black people personally, because according to the last census, there were 368 black people in the whole county where we live, out of about 25,000 people that live in the county.
Oh, wow.
Now that number has gone up significantly after some of the hurricanes in New Orleans and stuff like that. We got a large influx of people in here, and so things are changing. But as you know, I report the news, and the news exists to report the out of the ordinary. Right. So if I'm reporting on explosions happening in Afghanistan, and you've never been to Afghanistan, to you, that becomes the norm in Afghanistan. In your head, that's what happens in Afghanistan. And so if you said, hey, you want to go to Afghanistan? You'd be like, are you crazy? I'm not going to Afghanistan. No way. Right. When in reality, man, there's people living their lives in Afghanistan. There's women pushing babies in baby strollers. There's schools opening, and there's normal life going on all around the place. And there are places in Afghanistan where I literally would happily take my kids on vacation. But you don't know that, because that's not what the media reports. They only report the things that are out of the ordinary, not the ordinary. Well,
can I ask you something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Saying that, using that, what you just said right now, how do you feel like people over there are responding to black people coming into the neighborhood when they don't know a lot about black people?
Well, I can say that goes both ways. Yes, there are people who have been a little reticent, mostly older people that I've talked to. Actually, I have to say, only one guy in all the time. I mean, we moved here in 2004. Only one person have I ever heard say anything negative about black people, and he was a 75 or 80-year-old man.
Yeah, West Virginia is beautiful, man. That's where all my family's from.
And that's the now I've heard, for example, and you tell me what you think about this. Tell me if this strikes you as racism or not.
Okay.
I have several friends who are police officers. Mm-hmm. And after we got that big influx of people that came up here from New Orleans after whatever that hurricane was that wiped out New Orleans back,
Katrina.
Yeah, Katrina, years ago. Of course, the cops are going to deal with the dregs of society, white or black, right? They're not going to deal with the best people. But I heard from a cop who said, it's really interesting. If I stop a guy that a kid that's a local kid, was born around here, that I know is into drugs and I know is into some bad stuff, and I pull up next to him as he's walking down the street and I say, hey, come here, I want to talk to you. He'll come over and he'll stand there and he'll say, yes, sir, no, sir, and he'll be polite, hoping that I'm not going to hassle him, right? But these people who are coming in from New Orleans, they have a whole different view of the police. And so if I see a guy walking down the street and he happens to be a black guy, and I say, hey, come here, I want to talk to you for a minute. He'll say, F you, man, get out of my face. You can't be, it's immediately. And of course, here in West Virginia, that kind of attitude toward the cop, that does not fly. This is good old boy territory, right?
Yes, sir. I already know.
You mouth off to the cops, you're going to accidentally get tased a few times on the way to the jailhouse.
Yeah.
Or you might fall out the window or something, with the police car. And that's just the way it is around here, man. You just don't talk to cops like that.
Yeah.
And I don't care what color you are. But the sad thing is this cop said, it really frustrates me. It makes me sad because now when I see a black guy walking down the street, I immediately am suspicious of that guy. Because he said, honestly, I have not yet had an interaction with a black guy where he has not been disrespectful, and very often they are doing something illegal. They've got drugs on them or whatever. How does that make you feel hearing that story?
Well, I mean, I can understand on both sides. New Orleans was a whole different kind of place compared to West Virginia. Me, I love West Virginia. I used to go there every summer with my pawpaw, but it's not for them. It's different for them to be out there, and especially, hearing the accent and, all of those things like that, it probably throws them off. But, and for the cop, I can understand why he would feel that way.
Right.
Because you're used to something being the way that it is. And then, like you said, here comes something else. And you don't have a lot of interactions with black people on the norm. And you only get your information from the media. So you think that these dudes are probably criminals, or they might be selling drugs, or they might be violent, or whatever the case may be.
Okay, folks, we're going to have to stop it right there, but we're going to pick up the rest of this conversation on the next episode because we got so much good stuff from Kash Lee Kelly that I want you to hear every word. Stay tuned.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.